I'm Robert Sumwalt, and I'm the chairman of the NTSB. And the National Transportation Safety Board investigators arrived in Columbia around 10:30 this morning to begin our investigation of the tragedy involving an Amtrak passenger train and a CSX freight train. We've brought in a full investigative go team. Now, the NTSB, we're an independent federal agency charged by Congress to investigate transportation accidents, to determine the probable cause, and then to issue safety recommendations to keep those accidents from happening again. Before I go any further, I would like to offer our sincere condolences to those who've been affected by this tragedy. I've got with us today Mr. Jim Southworth and Mr. Mike Hiller. They are a part of the investigative team. They've got years and years of investigative experience. Dick Hibskin is leading the investigation. He's got over 30 years of rail experience, including over 20 years with the NTSB. He'll be with us tomorrow, but of course he's occupied today. Dick will be leading a multidisciplinary investigative team of experts. Our team will be looking at the operations of both trains. We'll be looking at the crew training and employment records. We'll be looking at company procedures. They'll be looking at they'll be examining the medical condition, or excuse me, the mechanical condition of each train. In addition, we'll be looking at the survival factors and the crashworthiness aspects of this collision. We have our chief medical officer here from Washington who will be looking at the medical factors, including making sure that the DOT required drug and alcohol testing is completed properly. That's standard for any commercial transportation accident. It's required. We'll be looking at the work rest periods of the crews of each train, as well as the cell phone records of the operators of each train, and that's standard for any transportation accident that we look at. We have a signal specialist that will be looking at the signals that govern train operations, those wayside signals that red lights, green lights, yellow lights, whatever they happen to be. We'll be looking at the signal systems. Each of those signals have an event recorder that records data, so we can download and see what those signals were saying. We'll also be looking at the rail switches, and I'll talk about rail switches in just a moment. As far as recorders, there are really two types of recorders that we are interested in. There's the traditional black box, if you will, which is the event data recorder, and there are video recordings. Now, most train operators these days have at least forward-facing video cameras, so they can look out and see what is ahead of the train in case there's a grade crossing collision or something. So we have, and some operators on some of Amtrak trains, they even have inward-facing video cameras. The forward-facing video camera from the forward-facing video from the Amtrak train, that recorder has already been recovered, and it was shipped back to Washington on the same government jet that brought our GO team in here. So our team in Washington in our recorders lab is pouring through that and be looking at that tonight. And tomorrow, when we have a press briefing, a media briefing, I think we will be able to update you on what we're finding from that. Oftentimes it has the speed printed out, superimposed on the video. Now, the event data recorder in each train, in both the locomotive for the Amtrak and the CSX, frankly, we are still looking for those. In addition to our investigators, we have representatives from the NTSB's Office of Transportation Disaster Assistance. They will be working closely with the families of the victims. Now, we are just literally in the very beginning stages of this investigation, but here's some preliminary factual information that we have right now. The Amtrak train was operating on CSX track, owned by CSX and controlled by CSX. On the Amtrak train, we've confirmed with Amtrak that there were 7 passenger cars and 1 locomotive. And on the CSX train, there were 2 locomotives, both on the forward end, head end of the train, and 34 empty auto rack cars. And I'll explain that in just a moment, what they were doing there. Now, as far as people on board, Amtrak has confirmed that the Amtrak train had 9 crew members. That would include an engineer, conductors, and we're still going to get a final count on how many conductors. Oftentimes there's a conductor and then 1 or 2 assistant conductors, and then there were some service employees as well that might work in the club car. And there were 136 passengers. Now, let me explain this right here. The Amtrak train would be operating from north to south, and the working theory is that it was continue on the main track, that it was to continue on the main track through this switch and continue on like this. Now, before the Amtrak came in, the CSX train had been over here at a loading and unloading facilities for cars, automobiles, and they had unloaded cars, automobiles, and had come out through a siding here, and come up north, and then backed into the siding. So this is where the CSX train was located, somewhere in here. So the bottom line is the CSX train is parked in the siding. For whatever reason, the switch, and when I talk about a switch, I'm talking about a rail switch that can actually switch how the track goes from here to here. For whatever reason, that switch was, as they say in the railroad industry, lined and locked, which basically means it was aligned for the trains coming down this way to be diverted into the siding. Of course, key to this investigation is learning why that switch was lined that way. Because the expectation, of course, is that the Amtrak would be cleared and would be operating straight down like this. Now, I've gone out with our team. First thing we did when we got here this morning was to go out and survey, and I say survey, I mean take a very careful look at the wreckage, and I can tell you there's catastrophic damage to each of the locomotives. In fact, I would say that the Amtrak locomotive would be not recognizable at all. Throughout the next few days, our investigators will work on scene to thoroughly document the accident site and to gather factual information. And our goal is to find out not only what happened, but why it happened, so that we can prevent it from happening again. While on scene, we will not be determining the probable cause. That's not why we are here right now. We will ultimately do that, but while on scene, we just want to collect what I call the perishable evidence, the information that goes away with the passage of time. So we've got to go and interview. We want to interview the crew of the CSX train. We want to interview them. We will interview dispatchers for CSX. We will interview everybody that we can to help us understand this accident sequence. Some of the information, memories change with the passage of time, so we want to get those interviews done now. Things like training records, we can do those in a week or two, but we want to get the information right now that will go away with the passage of time. And while we are here, we will not be speculating. We never speculate. We just want to deal with the facts. I imagine that our investigators will be here 5 to 7 days. And since we're just beginning our investigation, we don't have a lot of information to report to you, but I do expect us to do a press briefing again tomorrow, hopefully about this time, so that we can report to you what we have. I do believe first days of investigations are oftentimes difficult because we don't have a lot of factual information. Usually by day 2, we do have information, so I'm expecting tomorrow to be able to give you some good information tomorrow. Meanwhile, for the latest media briefings, to find out exactly when we will do our media briefings, follow us on Twitter, and that handle is at NTSB_newsroom. Or you can follow us on our website, www.ntsb.gov. I'm pleased to say we are getting excellent support from the local, state, and federal officials, including the Federal Railroad Administration, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're using them to document the wreckage for us through their evidence response team. We're also getting great support from Amtrak and CSX. Before I take questions, I'd like to thank the first responders. We'd like to thank the South Carolina Emergency Management Center for their support, and especially in using this facility. And Governor Henry McMaster has called me 3 times, and he met us on the scene, and so he's offered all the resources of the state to help us do our jobs. So in just a moment, I will call for questions. When I do, if you kindly would raise your hand when I call on you, state your name and your outlet. So we'll begin with the questions now. There's a question right here.
So David Lukowitz, Fox News Channel. We've been led to understand that these switches were under maintenance and were not operational at the time. What can you tell us about that?
So the question is, you're under the impression that the switches were under maintenance and perhaps not operational at the time. Let me say that...
Or the signals, excuse me.
Or the signals, okay. So we have heard, but not confirmed, that the signals were being worked on. However, having just gotten here, we have not been able to get to track that down. But yes, we're aware of such reports, and I'm thinking that, that there again, that's going to be something that we want to look at. It's a question right here.
Josh with the Associated Press. Is there evidence of any braking? And also, what is the speed limit through that junction? And if, based on what you've been able to gather so far, does it appear the train was going within the allowable limits?
Yeah, so the question basically is there evidence of any braking, and you mean braking as in slowing down, right?
Correct.
So let me answer that first. We have not been able to even find the event recorder at this time, the event data recorder for either train. However, we do believe that when we see the video, oftentimes, as I mentioned, like if you see these dash cams from police videos, they will have things, numbers and coordinates and all, and speeds. So oftentimes the speed will be on there, so that should help us with that. Now, the second part of your question was, is there any evidence of
Braking?
Okay, so
What's the speed limit through
so we do not know until we get the event recorders if the Amtrak train applied brakes. We do not know that. What is the speed through here for passenger trains coming down here? 59 miles per hour. Again, we don't have the information to know actually what the speed of the Amtrak was. We've seen figures out there, but before we release that information, we want to see it ourselves.
So, sorry, quick follow-up.
Yeah.
So 59 straight south, so if the train took onto the side rail, that would be too fast for that split?
Yes, that would definitely be, so if it did if it did go through the switch, going that way like it did, would that be too fast for it? And definitely that would be too fast for that switch, but even more serious is there's a standing train right here. Okay, so there's a question right here.
Caleb Burnett with the local CDS affiliate. I do know that there is positive train control that has been being discussed. I guess kind of, especially with everything that happened in Graniteville a few years ago, I guess kind of why hasn't this been in place in any of these Amtrak cars? Because couldn't that have saved these lives and maybe stopped this from happening?
So what's the status of positive train control? A lot of talk about PTC lately. PTC has been mandated to be installed over a lot of the nation's railroad. The deadline for that is the end of this year, December the 31st of this year. And so determining the exact status of the installation of PTC will be something that will be very important for us to find out. But to be clear, PTC is designed, an operational PTC system is designed to prevent this type of accident.
Behind you. Tristan Smith with CNN. Is there any indication, any preliminary information at this point that the rail switch had a mechanical issue in any way?
Is there any evidence at all that the rail switch had any sort of mechanical problem with it? We were able to see that it was actually literally locked with a padlock to make it lined to go into the siding. So that's what we've seen from that. There's a question right here.
Jamie Lovegrove, Post and Courier. Could you explain what the relationship is between the switch and the signal? If the signal was under scheduled maintenance, as we've heard, would the switch normally still just continue to operate the way it normally would? How would the conductors interact with that? And what do you think happened in this situation?
So what's the relationship between the switch and the signal? And we're exploring that. There are different arrangements. Sometimes there's a signal that will actually signal if the switch is lined for the siding. There's other types that he would get a green aspect, a green signal to say that you're cleared and authorized to continue straight down through here. So all of that it will be part of our investigation. There's no easy answer for that. So we have a signal specialist, and that's why, frankly, our investigations take a while, because we want to make sure that we're getting the facts.
Let's take two more questions, please.
Thank you. Question right here.
I'm Sammy Fretwell with the state newspaper. My question is, explain the difference between a signal and positive train control, and then also tell me if you think that positive train controls could have avoided this accident.
So could positive train control have avoided this accident? And a fully operational positive train control system could have avoided this accident. That's what it's designed to do. And Sammy, the first part of your question was?
What's the difference between that and signals?
What's the difference between a signal and positive train control? The positive train control is what they called an overlay system. That it looks at the signals, and if you have a green signal, the positive train control system will allow you to go. If you have a red signal, of course meaning stop, and you try to go blasting through that signal, it will actually it will enforce that signal. It will not allow you to go through the signal. So I'll take one more question. Back here in the back.
John Jeter, New York Times. You said there was a padlock on that switch?
Yes, there was a padlock on that switch, and that's what they do. When they mechanically, when this train would have backed into this siding, the conductor will get out and lock it in that particular position.
Was it supposed to be padlocked?
Yes, so was it supposed to be padlocked? They are supposed to, when they manually throw a switch, they're supposed to lock it. So that's why we say it was lined and locked. So we will be, again, we're just getting here. We've got a lot of information that we need to find. Our commitment to you is we will let you know as we're finding information. I expect to be able to give another press briefing tomorrow, and hopefully we will have a lot more information for you. Thank you
So nothing
very
today?
much.
No press conference
Nothing
later
else today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.